Repulsion. Released in 1965, Repulsion delivered a psychological curveball that continues to unsettle viewers generations later. Roman Polanski's first film made in England, it followed Carol, played with eerie restraint by Catherine Deneuve, as she spiraled into a state of mental collapse. The film's sound design didn't just enhance tension, it weaponized it. Scraping knives, ticking clocks, and phantom footsteps turned Carol's apartment into a sensory trap. The British Board of Film Censors slapped it with an X rating, restricting it to viewers 16 and older due to its disturbing visual cues and provocative subtext. Scenes of rotting food, ghostly hands clawing through walls, and a decaying rabbit left untouched in the kitchen became infamous symbols of psychological breakdown. While critics were split, some praising its realism, others troubled by its stark depiction of isolation, the film quickly earned a cult following. Speculation has long circulated that Polanski channeled his own feelings of alienation after relocating to London, though he never confirmed this directly. Some film scholars suggest Repulsion was a subtle critique of post-war gender expectations, with Carol's descent reflecting the suffocating pressure placed on women in mid-century society. Others interpret it as a haunting portrait of untreated trauma. Either way, the film's stark visuals and disorienting atmosphere continue to provoke debate, with today's film analysts frequently ranking it among the most unsettling psychological thrillers of its era. The Bad Seed. In 1956, The Bad Seed pushed Hollywood into uncharted territory. At the center was Rhoda Penmark, an eerily composed 8-year-old with a chilling lack of remorse. Patty McCormack's unnerving performance earned her an Academy Award nomination, a rare feat for a child actor at the time, and one that startled viewers who still clung to the post-war ideal of innocent youth. But what truly unsettled audiences wasn't the body count. It was this picture's central question: can evil be inherited? Adapted from William Marsh's novel and Maxwell Anderson's stage play, the story leaned heavily into the then contentious theory of genetic malevolence. In an era obsessed with nurture and morality, the idea that a child could be born with a murderous instinct was deeply taboo. The stage play ended on a grim note. Rhoda's mother attempts a murder-suicide, killing herself but failing to stop her daughter. The movie, however, had to navigate the Hays Code, which demanded that immorality be punished. The solution? A bolt of lightning. In this version's revised ending, Rhoda is struck down by nature itself, a bizarre, almost supernatural twist that continued to jolt viewers. To soften the blow, producers added a curtain call postscript, where the cast broke character and McCormack received a playful spanking from her on-screen mother. Some critics saw it as a clever wink, others called it a clumsy retreat from the storyline's darker themes. Rumors have long suggested that producers feared the feature might inspire real-life violence, prompting the decision to add that theatrical postscript. While unverified, the speculation adds another layer to its already hotly disputed legacy. Though the concept of the sinister child existed in folklore and literature long before, The Bad Seed helped crystallize it in American cinema. Analysts often point to Rhoda as a prototype for later horror icons. Films like The Omen and The Exorcist are frequently mentioned in the same breath. Whether coincidence or influence, the shadow of Rhoda Penmark still lingers. The nature versus nurture debate hasn't gone anywhere, and neither has the unease sparked by a child who kills without conscience. Häxan. In 1922, a silent film from Sweden and Denmark stirred controversy across Europe and North America. Häxan, translated as The Witches, merged horror with documentary showcasing graphic depictions of witch trials, ritualistic practices, nudity, and torture. The film's intensity led to censorship and bans in multiple US cities and heavy editing across Europe. Director Benjamin Christensen didn't just orchestrate the chaos, he stepped into it, portraying the devil himself with horns, claws, and a wild-eyed grin, writhing through surreal vignettes that many censors and some critics found shocking or indecent. But Häxan wasn't just grotesque for spectacle's sake. Beneath the disturbing visuals lay a pointed critique of mass hysteria and institutional misogyny. Film historian Jack Stevenson called it decades ahead of its time, citing its experimental visuals and commentary on collective fear. Still, the film's portrayal of female suffering, often stylized or sensationalized, has sparked ongoing debate. Was it a bold feminist statement, or just another exploitation piece cloaked in academic language? That tension only deepened when, in 1968, the film was reimagined as Witchcraft Through the Ages, a shortened version narrated by counterculture figure William S. Burroughs, complete with a jazz score. Some speculate this version's psychedelic tone helped cement Hexen's cult status, especially among avant-garde circles. A century later, its blend of historical analysis and nightmare fuel continues to jolt viewers, not just for what it shows, but for what it dares to say about fear, control, and belief. The War Game. In 1965, Peter Watkins delivered a film so disturbing that the BBC shelved it for 20 years. Titled The War Game, it staged a fictional nuclear attack on Britain, yet its near-spotless imitation of BBC newsreels blurred the boundary between fiction and reality. Watkins used non-actors, shot in stark black and white, and embraced a detached, matter-of-fact tone that gave the production a harrowing sense of authenticity. The scenes were graphic and relentless, mass casualties, radiation effects, and even state-sanctioned mercy killings. Though commissioned by the BBC, the film was withdrawn before airing, with officials citing fears it would unsettle audiences. Behind closed doors, whispers circulated of government pressure, worried the feature might undermine public confidence in nuclear deterrence. It wasn't until 1985, amid renewed Cold War unease, that the BBC eventually broadcast it. Paradoxically, despite being removed from television, The War Game won the Academy Award for Documentary Feature in 1966. A number of historians see it as a pivotal work in anti-nuclear media, though its real impact remains uncertain due to prolonged suppression. Even now, it continues to jolt audiences with its stark clinical depiction of what nuclear conflict might truly entail. The Pawnbroker. In 1964, Sidney Lumet's The Pawnbroker shook American cinema to its core. Mainstream films had rarely examined Holocaust trauma so directly, especially through the eyes of a disillusioned survivor managing life in a Harlem pawn shop. Rod Steiger's portrayal of Saul Nazarman, a man emotionally frozen by his past, earned him an Academy Award nomination and remains one of his most affecting performances. But the film's emotional gravity wasn't the only shock. It featured one of the earliest instances of nudity in a major Hollywood release after the production code era, an unflinching moment that had triggered a standoff with censors. Lumet refused to remove the scene, citing its emotional necessity. The controversy became a flashpoint in the growing push against the outdated production code, with many film historians pointing to The Pawnbroker as a key catalyst in the system's eventual downfall. Whispers spread that some theaters in conservative regions refused to screen the film, though records remain vague. Adding to the unease, Lumet employed rapid, jarring flashbacks to concentration camp horrors, techniques that audiences of the time weren't prepared for. Critics praised its raw intensity. The New York Times described it as a grim, shattering experience. Years on, the film's refusal to soften its subject matter continues to astound viewers, and some dare to guess that its boldness may have paved the way for the new Hollywood movement that followed. The Night of the Hunter. In 1955, Charles Laughton, better known for his on-screen roles, unleashed his only directorial project, The Night of the Hunter. What emerged was a cinematic anomaly, a Southern Gothic thriller laced with German expressionist style and eerie religious overtones. Robert Mitchum plays a preacher whose knuckles spell out love and hate, a performance that critics now call iconic, but at the time it left audiences confused and reviewers cold. Variety allegedly dismissed it as a pretentious fable, and the picture tanked at the box office. Laughton, disillusioned, never directed again. Some film historians suggest his theatrical background shaped this movie's haunting, almost stage-like atmosphere. Others point to the influence of silent era horror, especially in the exaggerated shadows and surreal set designs crafted by cinematographer Stanley Cortez. The distorted visuals, meant to mimic a child's perspective, prefigured the dream logic later seen in the work of directors like David Lynch. Rumors even floated around Hollywood that Laughton clashed with his crew over its unconventional tone. Though dismissed in its day, the work has since been canonized. The American Film Institute ranks it among the greatest thrillers ever made, and critic David Thompson once described it as one of the most terrifying films in American cinema. Its DNA shows up everywhere, from the Coen brothers' theatrical villains to Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, where Radio Raheem channels Mitchum's infamous monologue. Nearly 70 years later, this nightmare fairy tale still lingers like a bad dream, strange, disquieting, and impossible to forget. The Naked Kiss. The Naked Kiss didn't just push boundaries, it knocked them down. Released in 1964, the film opens with a bald woman ferociously striking her pimp, a moment so startling it continues to shake present-day audiences. That woman is Kelly, portrayed by Constance Towers, a former sex worker seeking redemption in a small town that proves far bleaker than the world she left behind. The twist? A revered local figure is unmasked as a predator, a storyline almost unheard of in mainstream cinema at that time. Director Samuel Fuller, a World War II veteran and one-time crime reporter, was notorious for his blunt impact filmmaking. He famously declared that movies should hit viewers between the eyes with a 2x4, and The Naked Kiss delivers exactly that. Early reviewers dismissed it as garish pulp, but Fuller employed that style as a facade for a searing critique of moral double standards. Extreme lighting, overwrought dialogue, and sudden cuts weren't mistakes. They were deliberate strategies to reveal the decay hiding behind respectable fronts. Some cinema analysts suspect Fuller was challenging the pristine image Hollywood peddled in the post-war era, hinting that genuine depravity thrived not in back alleys but behind tidy picket fences. Presently, the film is often revisited as a proto-feminist milestone, well ahead of its era. What once passed as exploitation now reads like rebellion. And that's why The Naked Kiss remains so disconcerting. It didn't just jolt audiences in 1964, its impact endures to this day. Carnival of Souls. In 1962, a low-budget horror film from Kansas astonished moviegoers with its eerie tone and surreal atmosphere. Carnival of Souls wasn't a Hollywood creation. It emerged from Herc Harvey, a director of industrial and educational shorts, in his sole narrative feature. Produced for somewhere between $17,000 and $30,000, the film relied on local talent, guerrilla-style shooting, and deserted locations to summon a ghost story that felt more like a waking hallucination than traditional horror. The narrative follows Mary Henry, a church organist who survives a car crash, only to be tormented by pale-faced apparitions and drawn to a crumbling pavilion on the town's outskirts. Early reviews were dismissive. Variety panned its execution, and it quietly disappeared from theaters. Yet the film refused to vanish. By the 1970s, late night tea resurrected it, and by the 80s, it had developed a cult obsession. Some claim its dreamlike visuals and cryptic ending, leaving viewers unsure if Mary actually survived the crash, helped lay groundwork for psychological horror in later years. Filmmakers like David Lynch and George A. Romero are frequently believed to have borrowed from its disorienting tone and spectral imagery. Tall tales even hint that Carnival of Souls might have been too peculiar for its era, a film that only made sense once the genre caught up. Now preserved in the Criterion Collection, it continues to jangle nerves more than 6 decades after its release. The Immoral Mr. Tease. In 1959, a movie devoid of spoken dialogue, violence, or any overtly explicit scenes sparked a censorship uproar across the United States. Russ Meyer's The Immoral Mr. Tease wasn't the first American film to showcase nudity, but it was the earliest to strip away any artistic veneer and present it purely for humorous effect. The storyline centered around a timid dental appliance salesman who inexplicably acquires the ability to see every woman around him completely unclothed. That's the entire narrative. Yet it was sufficient to get the film barred in places like Chicago and tagged with obscenity charges in multiple areas. Reviewers and censors alike were baffled. Produced on a minimal budget of roughly $24,000, the film amassed over $1.5 million, revealing a widespread eagerness to pay for saucy content, provided it was framed with absurdity. Film historian David Church attributes it to erasing the boundary between nudity as an art form and nudity as a tease, thereby launching the so-called nudie cutie movement. Meyer, a former World War II combat photographer and lifelong fan of pin-ups, leaned into the furor. It said he once joked, "I was just trying to make people laugh and make a buck." Whether true or not, the box office numbers told the story. Various film experts maintain that its incredible success helped erode the Hays Code, the rigid Hollywood censorship framework enforced since the 1930s. By the mid-60s, that system crumbled, replaced by the MPAA rating structure, partly thanks to films like this. These days, The Immoral Mr. Tease seems more like a whimsical relic than a daring provocation, but when it emerged, it was a cultural bomb, low-cost, brazen, and unapologetically outlandish. The Seventh Victim. In 1943, while most Hollywood studios leaned into wartime cheer, RKO unveiled something far bleaker. A low-cost psychological horror film that left audiences shaken. The Seventh Victim, produced by Val Lewton and directed by Mark Robson, introduced American moviegoers to a clandestine faction of devil worshippers lurking in the underbelly of New York's Greenwich Village. Unlike future occult thrillers, this one avoided spectacle. It whispered its terrors. The story follows Mary Gibson, a young woman searching for her missing sister Jacqueline, a trail that leads to the Pallidus, a secret satanic collective. But here's the twist. They claim to renounce violence, opting instead to pressure defectors into taking their own lives rather than murdering them. Despair saturates the film. Cinematographer Nicholas Musaraka, recognized for his work on Cat People, steeped each frame in noir shadows and hushed tension. Dialogue remains sparse, threats hover unspoken, and the finale provides no closure, only a muted descent into existential dread. The Production Code Administration allegedly flagged concerns over the film's grim overtones, yet no formal penalties ensued. Regardless, mainstream critics in the 1940s were perplexed. Some dismissed it as too cryptic, while others were deeply bothered by its refusal to offer solace. Financially, it was not a hit, but it never vanished entirely. By the 1960s, cinema historians revisited Lewton's body of work, and The Seventh Victim gradually attained cult reverence. In recent decades, the film has been restored and shown again at events like the TCM Classic Film Festival. Viewers' responses vary, but they're persistently intense. Certain present-day audiences find its portrayal of suicidal despair and ideological emptiness chillingly prophetic. A handful of scholars even propose it paved the way for the introspective horror surge of the 21st century. And rumors suggest that its shadow may have stretched into later works including Taxi Driver and Fight Club, each examining isolation, nihilism, and defiance of the norm. Real or not, it's undeniable that for a wartime B-movie created on a modest budget, The Seventh Victim continues to unnerve, and it achieved that without resorting to a single jump scare. Black Narcissus. Black Narcissus didn't just push boundaries in 1947, it shattered them. A production about Roman Catholic nuns grappling with isolation and desire in the Himalayas might sound tame today, but its psychological tension and visual intensity continues to electrify contemporary viewers. Directed by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, the narrative centers on a group of nuns sent to establish a convent in a former harem, already a loaded setting. Deborah Kerr leads a sister Clodagh, a woman battling past regrets, while Kathleen Byron's sister Ruth descends into a frenzy of obsession and jealousy. Her transformation, marked by a chilling stare and blood-red lipstick, culminates in a rooftop confrontation that remains one of cinema's most harrowing finales. This Technicolor palette wasn't merely decorative. Cinematographer Jack Cardiff used bold contrasts, crimson accents against shadowy blues, to mirror the character's psychological unraveling. In interviews, Cardiff described the process as painting with light, aiming to create a dreamlike, almost oppressive atmosphere. Despite being set in the Himalayas, the entire shoot took place at Pinewood Studios in England. Matte paintings and miniatures replaced actual landscapes, enhancing the picture's surreal tone. An uproar followed swiftly. The Catholic Legion of Decency supposedly flagged the project for its sensual undertones and themes of religious repression. Some American theaters even refused to show it. Critics debated whether Sister Ruth's breakdown was a cautionary tale about celibacy or a deeper critique of spiritual isolation. Time magazine referred to the movie's mood as hallucinatory, though the exact phrasing varies across sources. And then there are the rumors. Some claim Powell encouraged Byron to channel genuine jealousy into her performance, possibly stoked by his off-screen relationship with another actress. Whether true or not, the speculation adds fuel to this work's already feverish legacy. More than 75 years later, Black Narcissus still feels dangerous. A 2020 BBC remake tried to bottle the same intensity, but many critics agreed. It couldn't match the original's volatile mix of repression, desire, and psychological decay. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.